My name is Douglas Harlan. I'm 45 years old and I live in New Orleans. Most people know me as a maritime insurance broker, good at what I do, good at keeping my life locked down tight. But that's just the version of me the world gets to see. Behind the polished brass plaque on my office door, behind the expensive suits and the white-collar respectability, there's another story. A past I don't talk about. I used to be a fixer for some very serious people, the kind you don't cross twice. But that was a lifetime ago. Or so I thought. My wife Isabel and I have been married for 17 years. She's a former heiress who's found a new identity as a lifestyle blogger peddling yoga, matcha recipes, and wellness tips she doesn't even believe in. The money she grew up with is long gone, but she pretends otherwise. She needs the illusion of luxury as much as she needs the air she breathes. Caleb, our son, is the one thing that's real. He's 17, headed for college soon, and the only anchor I've got left. I'd do anything for that kid. He's the reason I keep my head down, the reason I play the part of the respectable broker instead of the man I used to be. But even anchors can't hold back the tide forever. I started noticing small changes in Isabel a few months ago. Longer trips out of town for retreats that seemed more like excuses to be somewhere else. New jewelry she couldn't explain, phone calls she always took outside. I let it go at first, told myself she was just restless, just chasing the next trend. But something didn't sit right. One evening I was sitting in my study when I heard her on the phone in the kitchen. Her voice was soft, too soft. Laughing like she hadn't laughed in years. When she came back in, she smiled at me like nothing had happened. That's when I knew. I didn't confront her. Not then. That's not how I work. Instead, I went back to the methods I'd tried to leave behind. A few quiet inquiries. A couple of favors called in from the shadows I used to know. Discreet, careful. Isabel had no idea. I still remember the first time I saw her phone left out on the marble counter. It was open to a text that said, "Counting down the days till you're free." My stomach twisted, but my face didn't change. I picked up Caleb from his study group that night like nothing was wrong. Kept up the act. I've learned over the years that people give themselves away in the small moments. And Isabel was slipping. She was already halfway out the door in her mind, but she didn't know I was watching. Waiting. At night, I'd lie awake beside her and think about the years we'd built together, the lies she'd layered over them like wallpaper. I'd wonder if she ever thought about the damage she was doing to Caleb, if she even cared. But mostly, I thought about what would come next. How I'd make sure this didn't blow back on the one person who really mattered. I played the devoted husband, smiling at the dinner parties, nodding at her rehearsed stories. But beneath that mask, I was already mapping out what I had to do. Because if Isabel was going to tear our life apart, she was going to learn just how far I'd go to protect what was mine. I found the burner phone in Isabel's yoga room 3 days after I decided to stop playing nice. It was hidden in a drawer, wrapped in a silk scarf, like she was trying to keep it sacred. My hands were steady as I turned it on, even though I could feel my pulse thumping in my throat. The messages started immediately. Dozens of them, each one more intimate than the last. They were all to someone named Jasper. I didn't know who he was, but I knew enough to see he was the man she'd been laughing for, the one she thought she'd run off with. I scrolled through the texts in the dim light of the yoga room, the smell of lavender candles cloying in the air. Jasper, it turned out, was some luxury travel influencer, some slick, camera-ready fraud who lived off of sponsorships and borrowed clout. The kind of man who'd sell his soul for a few likes and an all-inclusive trip to the Bahamas. Their messages were explicit. And not just in the usual ways. It wasn't just hotel room selfies and flowery promises of love, it was plans. Plans to take everything from me. Divorce me, drain my accounts, claim my business, and leave me holding nothing. Or worse. I should have been furious, but all I felt was cold. Like someone had flipped a switch inside me. I stood there for a long time, the phone warm in my hand, thinking about how close I'd come to never seeing this. Thinking about how easily Isabel could have left me with nothing but the wreckage. I didn't confront her. I didn't show my hand. Instead, I played the part of the husband she thought she'd outsmarted. I waited for the right moment. Caleb was the one who unwittingly confirmed what I already knew. One evening over dinner, he mentioned Jasper like it was nothing, just a name he'd heard in passing. "Mom said Jasper stopped by while you were out of town," he said. My heart didn't skip a beat, but inside, I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. "Jasper?" I asked lightly, like I didn't know a thing. "Who's that?" "Just some guy from one of Mom's retreats," Caleb said. He didn't see the way my fingers tightened around my fork. That night, I told Caleb he should stay with his friend Leo for the weekend. I didn't explain why. I just said, "It's better if you're out of the house for a bit." He looked at me with those clear eyes, trusting, and nodded. "Okay, Dad," he said. "Is everything okay?" "Yeah, I lied. Just a lot of work stuff. You know how it is." He didn't push. He never did. He packed his bag and left that Friday afternoon with nothing but a quick hug, and I stood in the doorway watching him go, thinking about how easy it was to lose everything if you didn't hold on tight. When he was gone, I went back to the phone. I read the messages again and again until I could recite them from memory. I started pulling every string I had left, quiet calls to old contacts who owed me more than a favor. Checking on Jasper's history, his debts, his mistakes. And Isabel? I let her think she was safe. In the daylight, I still wore the mask. The good husband. The doting father. But at night, I was building the walls of a plan that would keep Caleb safe and make sure Isabel and Jasper never saw what was coming. Because if they wanted to play games with my life, they were going to find out exactly who I used to be. And I was done letting them underestimate me. The Saturday night I chose to set things in motion. It was warm and humid, the kind of night where the air clings to your skin and makes everything feel heavy. Isabel thought I was at an insurance conference up in Baton Rouge, but I was in our living room watching the clock tick closer to the moment I decided would change everything. I'd spent days planning every detail. The bruises were carefully placed, nothing too dramatic, just enough to make a statement. A slip on the stairs, I tell them. A little clumsy moment. Nothing that wouldn't heal. When Isabel walked in around 9 that night, she looked surprised to see me. She wore one of those flowing white dresses she liked to pretend were effortless, hair swept up like she'd just come from a magazine shoot. She froze when she saw the marks on my face. "Douglas?" she asked, her voice all breathy concern. "What happened?" I gave her a slow smile, one I practiced in the mirror until it looked just right. "Oh, nothing. Just a little accident." I kept my voice calm, the way I used to when I was negotiating a deal I didn't want to reveal the details of. Her eyes darted around the room, her mind already racing. She didn't know it yet, but she'd walked into the trap I'd set just for her. I made the call to emergency services with deliberate calm. "My wife and I had a disagreement," I said, voice steady. "I'm worried for her safety." That was the phrase that would bring them running. By the time the police arrived, I was sitting on the edge of the couch, ice pack pressed lightly to my temple. Isabel was pacing in the kitchen, her phone clutched so tight I thought she might break it. The officers took one look at me, then at her, and asked the usual questions. "Ma'am, can you tell us what happened tonight?" She blinked at them, caught completely off guard. She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. He's unstable," she finally managed, her voice trembling just enough to be believable. "He's been acting different. He's been threatening me." I didn't say a word. I let her speak, let her weave her story. The words came easier the longer she talked. She was so sure of herself, so sure that this was her chance to be the victim. She had no idea that every word she said was another brick in the wall I was building around her. Caleb and Leo showed up while the police were still there. I'd made sure of that. I wanted Caleb to see this moment, to see how far his mother would go. He stepped inside, eyes wide with shock, and I saw his face go pale as he took in the scene, his father with a bruised face, his mother practically performing for the police. "Dad?" he whispered, voice cracking. "What's going on?" "It's okay, son," I said, my tone calm and reassuring. "It's just a misunderstanding." But it wasn't. It was the beginning of the end. And Isabel was playing her part perfectly. They put me in handcuffs, and I didn't fight it. I stood up, let them walk me out to the cruiser, the neighbors watching from behind their curtains. Isabel stood in the doorway, her face a mask of worried innocence. But I saw the flicker of fear in her eyes when she realized I wasn't resisting. When she realized this wasn't going to end the way she thought it would. At the precinct, they put me in a holding room, and I waited. I didn't waste my breath trying to explain. Instead, I made the one phone call that counted, the one to the man I'd once saved in a world Isabel didn't even know existed. He picked up on the first ring. "Douglas," he said, his voice calm and clipped. "What do you need?" "I need this to end," I said. "Tonight." He paused, then said, "Understood." I hung up, leaning back in the hard plastic chair, the metal of the handcuffs cold around my wrists. Outside, the rain had started to fall in sheets, washing the city clean. I closed my eyes and let it all settle in. Isabel thought she was writing the final chapter of our story, but she didn't know she was just a character in mine. She tried to destroy me in front of our son. She tried to make me the villain. But tonight, the real story would start and she'd never see it coming. They released me from the precinct before dawn. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered as the metal door swung open and in walked a man in a dark suit, shoulders square and eyes sharp. He didn't bother with small talk. He just looked at the officer behind the desk and said, "Douglas Harlan is leaving with me now." The officer shifted in his seat, glancing nervously at the man's badge. Sir, there's a processu. There's no process here, the man said. His voice was low, but it cut through the air like a blade. This is a federal matter and he's a protected asset. He didn't have to say my name. The room went quiet. The handcuffs came off and just like that I was free. I stepped out into the early morning chill, the city still waking up around me. The man didn't say a word until we were in the car, the windows tinted so dark it was like the outside world didn't exist. You okay? He asked. I'm fine, I said. Thanks for coming. You saved my life once, Douglas. This is the least I can do. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to. We drove in silence, the tires hissing on the wet pavement until he pulled up in front of my house. Isabel was there, sitting on the porch like she'd been waiting for me. She stood up as I got out of the car, her expression caught somewhere between relief and dread. Caleb was next to her, his arms folded tight across his chest. Douglas, she said, her voice breaking, what is this? What did you tell them? I didn't answer her. Instead, I turned to Caleb. Go inside, I said softly. I'll be there in a minute. Caleb hesitated, his eyes flicking between me and Isabel. Then he nodded, slipping past her and into the house without a word. I looked back at Isabel. She was shaking now, her eyes wide as she realized that whatever power she thought she had was gone. You made a mistake tonight, I said, my voice calm, even. You tried to paint me as the villain. But you forgot who you were dealing with. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her hands fluttered at her sides like she didn't know what to do with them. The man from the car stepped forward, his presence filling the space between us. Mrs. Harlan, he said, his tone formal. I'm here on behalf of national security. Your accusations against your husband have been reviewed and found to be without merit. She flinched like he'd slapped her. You're lying, she said, her voice thin. He threatened me. No, the man said firmly. You lied. And you did so against a man whose service and clearance are beyond your comprehension. You've not only embarrassed yourself, you've exposed yourself. The words hung there in the cold morning air. Isabel looked like she might collapse. Effective immediately, he continued, any claims you make against Mr. Harlan will be considered an attempt to defraud a federal asset. I suggest you think carefully about your next move. She swallowed hard, her throat bobbing as she tried to find something to say. But there was nothing. Nothing left for her to say. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. You thought you could take everything from me, I said. You thought you could make me the monster in our son's eyes. But you forgot that I don't play by your rules. Her lip trembled. Douglas, please, we can fix this. We can. No, I said quietly. We're past fixing. Caleb came to the doorway, his face pale but set. He looked at me, then at Isabel, and for a moment I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before, a choice. I'm staying with Dad, he said simply. I don't want to be here with you. Isabel's face crumpled. She reached for him, but he stepped back, his decision made. The man in the suit nodded once, then turned and walked back to the car, leaving us standing there in the dawn light. Isabel was crying now, silent tears slipping down her cheeks. I didn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. Caleb, I said, holding out my hand. He took it without hesitation. We turned and walked inside, leaving Isabel standing alone on the porch. The door clicked shut behind us and with it the last lie she'd ever be able to tell. The world outside was waking up, but for us everything was just beginning again. And this time it was on our terms. The next morning I went straight to work. Not the insurance broker facade I wore for the world, but the real work, the kind I hadn't needed to do in years. It was easier than I remembered. Some doors never really close, even when you try to lock them. I started with Jasper. A few calls to old contacts, a name dropped here, a favor called in there. In less than a day, I had everything I needed on him. Gambling debts that went back years. Maxed out credit lines with luxury casinos in Monaco. A trail of unpaid tabs at exclusive hotels from Paris to Bangkok. Jasper was living off of illusions and sponsorship deals he couldn't keep up with. And it turned out he owed money to people who didn't care about yoga poses and Instagram followers. They cared about getting paid. I reached out to one of those people, an old friend of mine who'd once called in a favor that saved his skin. I didn't threaten Jasper directly. I didn't have to. One whispered word from the right person was enough. By the end of the week, Jasper's influencer empire was starting to crack. Brands were pulling out of deals, unpaid invoices were being posted online, and his social media feeds were a mess of half-truths and desperate damage control. I let him sweat for a few days. Then I sent my men to him. 2 of them, quiet and polite, showed up at the door of his overpriced apartment in Miami Beach. They didn't need to push. Jasper was already half-broken by the time they sat him down. One of my men placed a manila envelope on the table in front of him. You're going to sign this, he said calmly. It's a confession. The truth about what you and Isabel did and what you plan to do. Jasper's hands were shaking. You can't do this, he said, his voice thin. I have followers. I have leverage. You have nothing, my man replied, his tone almost kind. And if you don't sign, everything you've been hiding goes public. The debts. The scams. The unpaid bills. I didn't need to be there to know how it went down. Jasper had always been the type to fold when things got real. And he did. His signature was shaky, but it was there. A full confession, every ugly detail of their affair, every whispered plan to destroy me. Meanwhile, back in New Orleans, Isabel's world was coming apart. I canceled every credit card she'd ever used, cards she thought were in her name but were actually tied to mine. Her blog sponsorships started drying up when I made a few quiet phone calls. Those wellness brands didn't want to be associated with scandal. Her friends, the socialites and hangers-on she used to brag about, disappeared overnight. Funny how fast people vanish when the money and the reputation go. Even her family stopped calling. Caleb saw it all. He was quiet, but he watched. And when he looked at me, there was no doubt in his eyes. She did this to herself, he said one night over dinner. You're just making sure she can't hurt us anymore. I nodded. That's the only thing I care about. Caleb made his own choice then. He told me he wasn't leaving for college yet. I'm going to stay here, help you, he said. We'll figure it out together. It was more than I'd expected, more than I'd dared to hope for. And it told me everything I needed to know. Isabel could keep her lies, her brand, her carefully curated image. Because she was alone now. And the only legacy I cared about was the one Caleb and I were building brick by brick. And Jasper? He was done. My men made sure of it. Isabel and Jasper had wanted to take everything from me. Instead, they ended up with nothing but the mess they made. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could finally breathe. The confession Jasper signed was everything I needed. My lawyer said it was ironclad, full of details, names, dates. Proof that Isabel wasn't just unfaithful, she was conspiring to ruin me. Jasper's trembling signature at the bottom was the final nail in the coffin of any legal claims she thought she had. I had the papers delivered to Isabel on a Sunday afternoon. She opened the envelope in the kitchen, her hands shaking as she read. I watched her face change, shock, denial, then a cold, panicked sort of rage. She tried to speak, but her mouth just opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Where did you get this? She finally whispered. It doesn't matter, I said, my voice calm. What matters is what it means. She sat down hard at the table, one hand pressed to her forehead. We can fix this, she said, her voice breaking. I made a mistake, Douglas. I'm sorry. I almost laughed. Sorry? After everything? After the lies, the betrayal, the plan to take me down? Sorry didn't mean a damn thing now. I don't want your apology, I said evenly. I want you to understand that it's over. I'm filing for divorce. And with this, I tapped the papers. You have no claim to anything. No money. No business. Nothing. Her face crumpled. You can't do that, she said, her voice rising. You can't just cut me out like I'm nothing. You did that to yourself, I cut in. You wanted to take me for everything I had. Now you'll walk away with nothing but your name, and even that's tainted. She stared at me, her eyes wide and wet. Douglas, please? I don't want to fight. We can figure this out. We can. No, I said. We can't. You're going to sign the divorce papers. You're going to walk away quietly. If you don't, I'll take Jasper's confession public. And I'll make sure everyone knows exactly who you are. She slumped back in her chair, her shoulders sagging like she'd aged 10 years in a moment. I can't believe you do this, she whispered. You should have thought about that before you tried to destroy me, I said softly. Jasper, of course, had already vanished. Word was he'd skipped the country, South America, maybe, or some beach town with no extradition. I didn't care. He'd served his purpose. Let him rot in some cheap cabana bar, pretending to be someone he's not. A week later, Isabel came to me with the divorce papers already signed. She didn't look at me when she handed them over. Her face was pale and drawn, her makeup smudged like she'd been crying for days. She didn't say a word. Just turned and walked away. I watched her go without a flicker of emotion. For 17 years, she'd been part of my life, my home, my family. And in the end, she'd thrown it all away for a man who wouldn't even stand beside her when it counted. As for Caleb, he stayed close. He watched everything. And when it was done, he came to me, his eyes steady. Are you okay, Dad? He asked. I looked at him, this kid who'd become my reason for everything, and felt something shift in my chest. I am now, I said. Thanks to you. And it was true. With Isabel's lies exposed and her claws finally out of my life, I felt like I was finally free. Caleb and I were done cleaning up her mess. It was time to start building something new, something real. Something that couldn't be broken by betrayal. Isabel had gambled everything. And she lost. It didn't take long for Isabel's world to fall apart completely. Within a month, she was gone, out of the big white house in the Garden District and into a cramped apartment in Tucson. No more dinners at exclusive clubs, no more sponsored retreats. Just her in a tiny two-bedroom above a holistic healing shop trying to sell crystals to tourists and find something to hold onto. I heard about it from an old friend of hers, a woman who used to do brunch with her every Saturday. She's working at that shop now, she said over the phone, her voice full of a kind of pity I didn't bother to share. She says she's finding her authentic self. Whatever that means. I didn't care what it meant. Isabel was gone and that was enough. Jasper, for his part, was even further away. One day an email popped up in an old inbox I'd forgotten about, just a single line from a new address. I'm staying gone. Don't contact me. No name, no sign-off, just that. I stared at it for a moment, then deleted it. Let him rot in some South American nowhere. He was her problem once. He wouldn't be mine again. Meanwhile, Caleb and I were moving on in our own way. He decided to stay local for college, turning down offers from schools out of state. I want to help with the business, he told me one evening, his voice quiet but firm. I know it's not glamorous, but I want to be here. It's not about glamour, I said. It's about building something real. He nodded, and that was that. The decision was made. We didn't talk much about Isabel. There was no need. We both knew she was out there somewhere, nursing whatever image of herself she could still hold onto. But for us, the past was done. I got calls and emails sometimes, people from the old social circles, the ones who used to know us as the perfect couple. I heard about Isabel, they'd say, voices low and careful. Are you okay? I'd tell them yes, I was fine. And I was. Because with every question, every half-sincere apology, I felt lighter. I didn't owe anyone an explanation anymore. The house was quieter now. The chaos was gone. No more pretending for dinner parties, no more masks to wear around people who didn't really care. Just me and Caleb rebuilding from the ground up. Some nights I'd sit out on the porch with a drink and listen to the city settle around me. The sounds of the streetcar rolling by, the murmur of music from a bar down the block. And I'd feel something I hadn't in years, peace. I ignored the calls that still came sometimes, the late-night voicemails from Isabel I never bothered to play. I knew what they'd say anyway, half apologies, half blame. But I didn't owe her any more of my time. She had her exile, her quiet failure. Jasper had his. And Caleb and I? We had our future, stripped of illusions and false promises. For the first time in a long time, that was enough. By spring, the last echoes of the chaos had finally settled. Isabel was just a name on old mail and unanswered voicemails. Jasper was a ghost haunting some distant shore, too busy running from his own mess to bother me. And Caleb and I were still here, moving forward. One night after dinner, Caleb sat down across from me at the kitchen table. He looked older, somehow wiser, even in the way he carried his shoulders. I've got something to tell you, he said, a half-smile tugging at his mouth. I leaned back in my chair, ready? What is it? I got early admission, he said. The federal internship pipeline in D.C. They want me to start this summer. For a second, I didn't say anything. The weight of it hit me all at once. This kid I'd spent my whole life protecting was about to step into a world I'd once lived in myself. But he wasn't going there to fight the way I had. He was going to learn to build something honest. I nodded slowly. You've earned it. He grinned. You think I should do it? I think, I said, that this is your chance to build something that lasts. To make your own rules. He let out a long breath. It's weird, Dad. All this time, I thought revenge was everything. But watching you, I realized it wasn't about that. It was about making sure they couldn't touch us again. I looked him in the eye steady. Caleb, I didn't want them dead. I just wanted them to be accountable. There's a difference. He nodded, and I could see him turning it over in his mind, turning it into something he'd carry forward. The lessons I'd learned in the dark, stripped down to something pure. Something he could make his own. After he went upstairs, I opened the safe in my study and took out the file I'd kept locked away, Jasper's confession. I hadn't looked at it since the day he signed it. I didn't need to. It wasn't about leverage anymore. It was about closure. I flipped through the pages slowly, my eyes skimming the words like they were someone else's life. In a way, they were. That man, the one who had to lie, to fix, to play the game behind the scenes, he was gone. And I wasn't going back. When I was done, I put the papers back in the safe. I locked it and set the key aside, not because I thought I'd need it, but because it felt like a final punctuation mark. The last period at the end of the story. The next morning, Caleb came to me with his bag packed. "I'm ready," he said. "Good," I said, clapping a hand on his shoulder. "Go make your mark, son." He grinned, and in that grin I saw every choice I'd made coming back to me, every hard decision, every line I'd crossed to protect him. But more than that, I saw the man he was becoming. The man who wouldn't have to live in the shadows the way I had. I watched him go, and I didn't feel loss. I felt pride. As the door closed behind him, I turned to the window and watched the sun rising over the city. New Orleans was waking up, and so was I. There were no more secrets to keep, no more debts to pay. Just the quiet promise of a life rebuilt, one that belonged to Caleb and to me. The past was buried, and the future was finally ours.